Let's see what happens when we join a little Zen and Sufi together. First, there's that old story of the young boy who entered the monastery at a very early age, intent on learning truth and becoming enlightened. But this young boy grew into a giant of a man, a gentle giant, learning the precepts, practicing the sutras. But then, in that place, a war was occurring, and soldiers came round to recruit young men into the army. So when they came to the monastery, and there was this giant of a man, he was immediately conscripted. But being the gentle giant and having the training that he had, he went to his master, the abbot, and said to him, Master, how can I go to war when all of my practices, all of my training have been to have compassion, non-hurting? And the abbot said to him, it is your duty. You are called to be a soldier. Be a soldier. So this gentle giant put on his armor, and he became a fighting machine. He was lauded for his valor on the battlefield, and the battle was won. And so he came back to the monastery, but in presenting himself to the abbot, he said, "Oh, Master, I am no longer worthy to be counted amongst those who are here in this place." And his master looked at him and said, "Then it was your duty to be a soldier. Now it is your duty to meditate. Now take off that stupid armor and come down to the meditation hall." Then there's the story of that man who had been with a great Sufi master for some years. And his Sufi master called him to him and said, "Now it is time for you to go into the forest and learn to control your sensibilities." So, doing as his master said, he went into the forest and sat under a tree. And after some while, he was able to control his senses and make that inward journey. So, sitting in great silence, one day, all of a sudden, the strident sound of a bird in the tree above him pierced his inwardness, and he found anger rising up, and he thought to himself, "How dare that bird interrupt my silence?" And all of a sudden, the bird dropped out of the tree, dead at his feet. And so he thought to himself, "Oh, I must have attained some great powers. I must now be a great dervish." So he rose up from his place in the forest and went off down the road. But then he saw a rather palatial-looking house in the distance. So he went and knocked on the door, and a woman answered the door. And drawing himself up to his full height, he said, "Woman, bring me water and food. You have before you an accomplished dervish, and his word must be obeyed." Well, the woman bowed in front of the dervish and went off, but she was gone for some very long while. And so the dervish started to get very angry. So when she finally came back, he said, "Do you know that you could bring down the wrath of a dervish on your head?" And she said, "Well, I'm not a bird in a tree, am I?" And he said, well, how did you know that? How are you reading my mind?" And the old woman said, "Well, I myself was with a master, and he told me that I should come into his presence when he called, but in the meantime that I should be dutiful. Well, he did not call me, but powers such as has been demonstrated have come unbidden to me." So the dervish said, "Well, will you take me on as your student then?" And she said, "You cannot even obey your own master. How would you then obey me?" So, heeding what the old woman said, he went back to his Sufi master, who ignored him for some while, but then finally called him to his presence and said, "Now go to a certain place where you will find a scavenger. Become his student." So, obeying his master, he went off to that place, and there indeed he did find the scavenger sweeping the streets, his appearance filthy, and he was abhorred by this sight. But something kept him there, and then the scavenger turned to him and said, "What bird are you calling down dead from the trees, Lajjawuddin? What old woman is reading your mind today, Lajjawuddin?" And the young man suddenly had a realization, but he had to ask, "How did you get these powers?" And the scavenger said to him, "You fool, your master, your teacher, has been teaching you duty, not duty to a cause, not duty to meditation, but duty, you fool." This young man became a student of the scavenger, and after some short while, he became a great Sufi master with an honorific before his Lajjawuddin. That was his name. What is this word duty? Synonymous with, from your experience. Duty. What does this word mean for us from our experience? Duty.
Responsibility.
Pardon?
Responsibility.
Responsibility.
I was thinking of obedience, the German term.
Obedience, responsibility, duty.
Duty is like dharma. It's what you're required to do, what your purpose is.
The Dhamma. The Dhamma. But then we can ask, what is the Dhamma?
I see it as our calling, what we're called to do. We're all called to do something different.
Okay. So if we have this word Dhamma and we know it's universal in its meaning, then we know. And everything fits into it, doesn't it? Duty, obedience, responsibility. They all fit in to this word called the Dhamma. So if we take it a step further and ask, what does the Dhamma mean for us?
It's self-imposed. It's self-imposed.
Yes?
That's it.
Mm-hmm. So, just adding another little ingredient, the Divine Mother that I was with for those years used to say, even if you have not one friend, you have to be true to your God self. Could we equate that with the Dhamma?
Gotta be true to yourself.
No, you don't. If you don't, you could necessarily... What's it, Eckhart Tolle? So he went out of his head, then decided, oh, look, I'm going to commit suicide. Then he goes, look, this is ridiculous, and then he come off the idea of himself. You don't have to do it.
Right on.
That's it.
That's
You
it.
don't know. You've got no idea.
Yes.
That's how it happened for him. And through just as hard a suffering as he could come up with, he just thought, this is ridiculous. Got it. Just laughed. And then now look, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Dhamma, the God self, duty, responsibility, obedience.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes with Dharma it's like feeling I should go in one particular direction, start heading in the direction, but then something happens and pulls you in another way, which you didn't think you'd go in.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're going there.
Is it other than the Dhamma?
So you can either resist it or you can go with it.
Doesn't make any difference, does it, really?
No.
Still the Dhamma. Okay.
So
That's another kind of psychological terms. Authenticity, and if we go with Maslow, the self-actualization, it's in the pyramid of needs, coming
Okay.
to the top.
Yes, yes. I think I'm out of a job. Better go on holidays.
What,